When the Berlin Wall came down, it felt like more than just the end of a war. It really felt like the start of a brand new chapter for the entire world. But what was that chapter actually going to look like? For the first time in decades, the planet wasn't split into two opposing camps. What came next was this incredible, intense period of trying to remake the world, an era just packed with huge ambitions and some pretty harsh realities. So let's dive into this amazing moment of promise and peril.
Okay, picture this. It's 1999, you're in Seattle, tens of thousands of protesters are flooding the streets, completely shutting down the city, and their target is the World Trade Organization. This moment, right here, it just perfectly captures the central conflict of this new era. On one side, you had this big dream of a single, connected global market, and on the other, you had all these fears that this new world order was leaving people and the planet behind. This wasn't just another protest, it was a battle for the very soul of globalization.
So, this is the question, right? This is what it all boils down to. With that old superpower rivalry finally gone, were nations going to come together and solve big global problems through cooperation? Or would a bunch of new conflicts and old nationalisms just rush in to fill that power vacuum? The answer, as you're about to see, was, well, it was complicated. All right, so let's start with the most ambitious project of all, the attempt to create a system of global rules to prevent war and actually deliver justice. The whole idea was to build international cops and courts to manage a new, more peaceful world. For the first time since it was created, the United Nations wasn't totally paralyzed by the Cold War veto. All of a sudden, there was this incredible optimism that the UN could finally step up and be the world's peacekeeper, just like it was supposed to be after World War II. And its role in pulling together the coalition against Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1991, that seemed to prove this new power was real.
But the reality on the ground was incredibly tough. And what's so fascinating about this is the stark contrast. In places like El Salvador and Cambodia, UN peacekeepers were absolutely essential in ending these brutal civil wars. But then you have the devastating failures. In Somalia, the whole mission just collapsed into chaos. And most tragically, in Rwanda, the UN basically stood by, unable to stop a genocide that killed 800,000 people. This really mixed record showed the deep, deep limits of international peacekeeping. Out of the tragedies of the 90s came another really bold idea, a permanent court to hold individuals, not just countries, accountable for the absolute worst crimes imaginable. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, was founded on a revolutionary principle that no one, no matter how powerful they are, is above the law when it comes to genocide or war crimes. But here's the catch. The court's power was limited right from the start. As you can see here, some of the world's most powerful nations, we're talking the US, Russia, China, they all refused to join. The United States, for instance, was worried that its soldiers deployed all over the world could be targeted by politically motivated lawsuits. This refusal really undermined that whole idea of universal justice, creating a world where some nations played by one set of rules and others didn't have to.
Now, even with its limits, the ICC still made some serious waves. In a move that was just completely unprecedented, it indicted a sitting head of state, Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, for the atrocities in Darfur. And this perfectly shows the court's main goal, to send a powerful message that the age of impunity for leaders who commit mass murder was officially over. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the economy. Because at the same time all this was happening, there was another massive project underway, creating a single, integrated global economy. The big question, though, was who's going to write the rules for it? The groundwork for this was actually laid decades earlier with something called GATT, which was basically an agreement to lower trade barriers. After 8 successful rounds of talks, the whole system got supercharged in 1995 with the creation of the World Trade Organization, a way more powerful body designed to enforce the rules of free trade across the entire planet. But as the global market got bigger, so did something else: debt. And look at this number, it's just staggering. By 1989, developing countries owed a whopping $1.3 trillion to foreign banks and institutions. To put that in perspective, just 2 decades earlier, that number was only $70 billion. This massive mountain of debt became a huge crisis for the new global economy. So to handle the crisis, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, stepped in. But its help came at a steep price. It prescribed what everyone called a bitter pill, really harsh austerity measures. Countries had to slash their spending on things like food subsidies and public services
just to get new loans. And while the goal was to stabilize their economies, these policies often led to riots, pitting long-term economic health against the very real immediate suffering of the people. By 1989, it was pretty clear that just piling on more and more loans was not working. The Brady Plan was a real turning point. For the first time, creditors officially admitted that some of the debt just had to be forgiven. Banks agreed to reduce what was owed, but, and this is a big but, in return, debtor nations still had to swallow that bitter pill of IMF-mandated austerity. It was a compromise, sure, but it was one that completely reshaped global finance. All right, now let's turn to what was maybe the most urgent issue of the time. What on earth do we do with the tens of thousands of nuclear weapons left over from the Cold War? And here, we see one of the most incredible success stories of the entire era. The START treaties between the US and the former Soviet Union led to truly massive cuts in their nuclear stockpiles. I mean, look at this chart. They went from a terrifying peak of over 60,000 warheads combined down to just a fraction of that. For a moment there, it really did feel like that nuclear shadow was finally lifting. But just as the giants were disarming, a new fear started to creep in: proliferation. The danger wasn't just about the US and Russia anymore. The big concern was, what about other countries? Places like India, Pakistan, and North Korea, all working on their own nuclear weapons. The nuclear club was threatening to get a lot bigger and a whole lot less stable. And this just really drives home that mixed record on arms control. In a huge setback, the US Senate voted against ratifying the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty in 1999. The hope of a worldwide, permanent end to all nuclear explosions, a goal for decades, was just shattered. It was a really sobering blow to the optimism of the era. So, as we start to wrap this up, it's pretty clear that this post-Cold War project of building a new world order was far from finished. And a new, kind of unexpected player was just starting to enter the scene. This was the rise of international non-governmental organizations, or INGOs. We're talking about groups like Oxfam, UNICEF, and many others that began working on a global scale, providing aid, fighting for human rights, and tackling problems that governments either couldn't or wouldn't. They were essentially building what some people started calling an international civil society, a whole new force working for the common good. So, here's the most important takeaway. The end of the Cold War did not lead to some simple, tidy, new world order. Not at all. Instead, it kicked off an era defined by a constant, messy, and often frustrating struggle. It was like a giant tug-of-war between these grand global ideas, for peace, for justice, for one big market, in the powerful, stubborn realities of national interests and local politics. And that leaves us with a final thought. The institutions, the rules, the economic systems that were all built in this frantic period after the Cold War, they still shape our world today. But from trade wars to new global threats, the consensus that created them seems to be breaking down, which leads to the big question for all of us. Are we still playing by those rules, or are we in the middle of writing new ones all over again?